Brent Laster is a global trainer and founder of Tech Skills Transformations, who's been helping developers adopt new technologies for decades. He's presenting in his talk, Incorporating AI in Your SDLC, Practical Ways to Leverage AI Tools Across Every Phase of Your Development Lifecycle, Not Just Coding. Please welcome Brent.
Thanks, Matt. So can you guys hear me okay? Is this good? Yeah, great. So while we're getting set up here, how about a round of applause for the conference organizers, for Ben, Julio, Trini, everybody. Great job. Thanks for having us. All right, so as we said, my name is Brent Laster. I have a company called Tech Skills Transformations, and we're going to talk for a few minutes about using AI in producing production software, different ways of doing that. It's kind of my background. I have a background in DevOps. Let's see, things aren't moving along here. Good thing I got a couple minutes started. All right, so sorry about that, folks. Slight pause, technical difficulties. A little bit about me real quick, and since we've got limited time, I'm not going to drag you through all this. So basically, I spent a long time, probably too long, in corporate. No offense to anybody in corporate now, but as a developer, manager, director, DevOps organizations, product-facing organizations, security organizations, a little bit of everything, a little bit of all kinds of fun. Now I have my own training company, Tech Skills Transformations, as you guys saw. We do training with folks like O'Reilly. We speak at conferences like this, do some custom training for folks, and a lot of different stuff. Started out with like things like Git, Jenkins. Anybody still use Jenkins? There's always a couple. I always ask that. And part of the reason I ask that is because one of the first books I wrote was on Jenkins, but I do have a number of books that I've written along the way, all available on Amazon. Or if you have an O'Reilly subscription, you can read the last 4 of them for free. My latest one is GitHub Copilot, just out in production now. The print version will be out in a couple weeks. But this talk is based around one I wrote with the CTO of a company called Tab9. Anybody use Tab9? Know of it? Yeah, okay. It's another kind of like competitor to Copilot, AI assistant there. So we started writing a book. O'Reilly asked me about writing a book on using AI in all the different phases of the software development lifecycle. I thought, well, that sounds really interesting. That could be an interesting thing to explore. By the way, there's information connecting with me on social media if you're interested in doing that. So a little bit of background here. And I think everybody knows this, so I'll just gloss over it very quickly. Everybody got real excited when OpenAI put a chatbot in front of their models back in 2022. Everybody said, wow, we can really talk to the AI models now. We can ask them, we can interact with them, and that was great. But typically what we find is users leverage these AI assistants like GitHub Copilot and such, in one of 3 ways. And we talk about that as, user hero, there we go. Talk about it in terms of 3 different sort of modes of using these things. First off is an accelerator. When you are writing code in your IDE and you are waiting for it to predict the next function or something, and then you get that function definition, you get that completion in there, the intent is to be able to accelerate your capabilities, to be able to leverage your capabilities and use the AI to help you get things done faster. So you get to do the more fun things, the things that we really enjoy doing as developers. Explorers, and I'm sorry about this pop-up here because we don't have the slides, but exploring, asking AI, how do I do X? How does this work? How could I do this thing? The things we used to do on Stack Overflow. Anybody still use Stack Overflow? Yeah, some of us, right? Yeah, I still do. Yeah, it's a great resource. But now we can also ask the AI, we can get answers within the context of what we're already working on. And things like being a director or direction. Tell the AI, create a function that does X, create tests for this thing, do this for me. So different ways of thinking about this. And all of these apply across the different levels of the software development lifecycle. Now your software development lifecycle is probably going to differ from mine, but most of these have things in common, things like planning, development, testing, maintenance, refactoring, all these kinds of activities that we all have to do at some point in there. So it turns out that we can use AI across these things, and perhaps in ways you haven't thought about. That's one of the goals here. It's kind of get you thinking a little bit out of the box about what some of the options are and some of the ways you could take advantage of this AI. So background. Everybody knows what RAG is? Basically, right? Right. You take your data, you put it into a form that can be searched easily. Not only search, not like keyword search, but search like for things that are related to it numerically. We put it into numeric form, and then we can take our data and we can basically go through. This looked a lot cooler when we had animation, so use your imagination here. But we can basically take it and say, okay, we can ask a question about coding, about whatever. We get our question, it gets translated into numeric form, and it goes off and queries our local database first, our local data store. Maybe it's our code repositories, maybe it's your repositories about your manuals, maybe it's your design documents, whatever the case may be. Finds the most relevant pieces of information from that, the most relevant hits, and takes that and sends it on to the large language model when you query it to find more relevant information. The idea is that we are providing additional context from our local data stores for that large language model to take into consideration and to give us a better quality of answer. More grounded, less likely to hallucinate, all that good stuff. So when we talk about planning with AI, if we have taken our code bases, for example, and we have indexed them, and by the way, a lot of coding assistants now will automatically index things. GitHub Copilot creates a local index on when you're working in like VS Code, and it's already got your code indexed whether you want it to or not. But when you've got your code indexed, turns out that when you're doing these planning meetings, anybody use Agile planning meetings? Yeah, you do the whole thing with the scorecards and stuff like that? Yeah. Well, you know, one of the things is when you're sitting around doing those, you're relying a lot on developer experience, right? The experience of the folks on the team and what they've done before and what they may remember about what they've done before. But if you have a local RAG data store and you can use RAG, well, it turns out you can ask lots of good questions to help get further along more quickly. Things like, how did we implement function X? Does our code use dependency Y that has a security vulnerability? If so, where? I don't know about you guys, but when I was in development, we had a lot of times, we had very short turnaround times if we had a CVE, right? We had things we had to turn around very quickly. So it was very critical for us to figure out where we use those dependencies, those things that were vulnerable. We want to migrate from one platform /cloud /language /framework to another. Where do we need to focus our efforts, right? Open source library we use, change lasting terms. How are we using that? Do we have code that does Z? Do we have code that uses a JWT token to authenticate? So these are the kinds of things you can be in a planning meeting, right? And you can sit around and you can ask these questions and get quick responses. You can figure out, oh yeah, we have that code that does this, or oh gosh, we have these 10 different things that use that library. So that's kind of the idea we're talking about. Thinking about it. One other kind of thing you can do in planning, prototyping. Suppose that you are trying to brainstorm what it's going to take to actually implement code. So you might go through and you might say, well, we could pseudocode this out. We could even just do comments. Now there's a long-winded sort of comment here, given a list of app features, blah, blah, blah. Determine a valid order which the user can unlock and access features. Maybe they're using feature locks. Features, upload, share, define a function to accept the feature dependency list, build a directed graph, so on and so forth. This is a set of comments that you could quickly define in a meeting, and I fed it into AI, and AI generated the code over there. Now, I'm not saying this is production code, but it doesn't have to be at this point, right? It just has to be enough code to give you the idea of this is what we're looking for, or maybe we need to go back and refine our requirements, refine our ideas, and then to get you started. So you can look at the code, you can kind of get an estimate of how much time it's going to take. What else do we need to do? It's kickstarting, it's bootstrapping. That's the idea. When we talk about development, all kinds of AI assistants out there now. Anybody using Cursor? Still with the payments things, they haven't scared you off? How about Windsurf? Yeah, a couple folks here. So you've got all kinds of options. You've got coding assistants like GitHub Copilot and Tab9 that you can tie into your development environment and use them there. You've got more of the AI-based browsers, which have kind of an AI native feel to them, kind of AI from the startup. Doing things like collaborating like the AI assistants, but also then offering the use of agents to do more and more for you. You've also got things like Perplexity. Anybody use Perplexity? Couple folks, yeah. Perplexity is really cool because what it does is it allows you to go out and search for things that are more recent, up to date, real time. So whereas, I mean, something like Copilot or Tab 9 or those kinds of things, they're based off of models, and those models have a training cutoff, right? They have a training point in time where they were cut off, and they don't necessarily know what new features have come out, what other things have been deprecated in the language. But you can go out like to Perplexity AI, and I can ask it, what are the latest changes in Go I should be aware of? And it can go out and give me a list of those changes. So I can look at my code and say, okay, even though my models that I'm using behind the scenes in these other assistants don't know what's been deprecated, don't know what's new, now I can get a list of this. And the other cool thing about this is Perplexity also always connects its sources. It always lists the sources that it has used, and you can link on those and go to them. So this is a great way of kind of keeping things up to date. If you want to be able to find out what's new, what's changed, what should I be aware of, that maybe my model that had a training cutoff of last year doesn't know about, use something like Perplexity. So coding assistants, how can they help? We've got a lot of things up here. Some of these you probably thought about, some not. Of course, writing code from comments, automatic test generation, SQL generation. Anybody do SQL? Anybody like doing SQL? Couple folks, yeah. How about regular expressions? Who likes to do regular expressions? That's impressive. I usually do not see that many hands. Usually that's not their favorite thing to do. I used to write Perl code a long time ago. I'm dating myself, but did lots of regular expressions. You can have it generate regular expressions relative to whatever language you're doing, relative to whether you're doing JavaScript, whatever. Pattern mappings and generations. You can have it generate example patterns. One of the things I did was writing a function to work with, I think, a social security number or our area phone numbers. You know, I had it generate, say, given a list of, or give me a sequence of mappings of area codes to states, and it generates by state a list of area codes. Now, of course, you cannot and should not assume that those are accurate, because these things are not going to go out there and verify everything on the web, but you're going to have, you can have a list and you can use them for testing data. We also can do things like documenting code. Boy, we're going to talk about documenting code in a few minutes. I got some things to say about that. Fixing code, reviewing code, all sorts of good stuff. Mainly reducing the cognitive load, giving you back your brain power to be able to use on the fun stuff, the stuff that you're really interested in, the stuff that you're good at. But AI needs good context, needs good guidance. It can hallucinate. Can be out of date, is out of date if you're using a model, right? Every model is going to be out of date at some point. AI doesn't do real-time validation, doesn't care about tech debt. Bottom line, AI-generated code intended for production must always, always, always be subject to the same kinds of checks, the same kinds of balances, the same kinds of reviews, same kinds of tests with that. One of the things I talk about, people laugh at me sometimes I talk about this, because GitHub used to say that you have, their AI was a AI pair programmer. And I don't like that, because a pair programmer to me is someone who is on a level with you and someone who understands your code base and has an inherent understanding, or at least a gained understanding over time, and can do the same things. I tend to look at AI more as an intern, personal perspective. And that does not mean anything negative towards intern, but as someone who is competent, given enough context, given enough direction. I can go off and tell an intern to create an authorization service, and they may often do it. They may do it in a totally different language or in a totally way that we doesn't apply to our standards. So you need to be thinking about, how can I tell it to be specific? How can I tell it to do things? If the slides were working, you would see an animation here in development side where I said, okay, referencing a GitHub issue that's open in a repository, go off and suggest code to implement that issue. And you would see the AI agent in GitHub Copilot going through and actually referencing the issue. We gave it just a link to it in the chat interface, and then going off and suggesting the files that need to be changed, and then going through and testing it. So the agent functionality in Copilot has a way to go through and basically say, give me a high-level go, let me go change the files, figure out what needs to be changed, let me also generate tests, and I can tell it to generate tests, and it will run until either all the tests pass or until, if it gets stuck, if it can't go any further. So, very cool demo if we had the slides running, but the idea is that we can leverage this new agent functionalities in lots of ways. The ability to gather input, suggest changes, indent changes, and run through it. Of course, we want to be careful about that. We want to do things like do a commit into Git or whatever source management system we're using prior to the agent running. So just in case the agent doesn't do things right, or in case we decide we don't want all the changes, we can go back and actually get back to a good breakpoint. How about resolving issues? So resolving issues with AI, lots of these assistants, all of them have some kind of a shortcut fix command. Go and figure out what's wrong with my code and suggest a fix for it. But what I also want you to think about, what are some other questions we can ask these assistants when we're trying to resolve things? Things like, what are some places in a repository where logic, performance, security errors can occur? You know, anything you could ask a colleague, anything you could ask somebody else on the team, no reason you can't ask the AI. It may not be entirely comprehensive, but it may be enough to get you thinking about it and point you in the right direction. What are the most recent significant changes to the code base? Now, of course, you can do things like with Git and stuff to find out the changes, but you can say significant, maybe the most significant security changes or significant logic changes, whatever the case is. What are the code changes that affected the code in this branch between some dates? How can I make this code be more efficient with system resources? Where else might this problem occur? What other parts of the code base use this routine? So this is that exploratory role we're talking about, right? Using the AI to help you gather insights really quickly that you can then build on, and you can then figure out what else I need to do. It's not necessarily just about having the AI fix issues, which it generally is pretty good at. It's about giving you pointers to what else to look at. Working with tracking mechanisms, Copilot examples here. So you can go in and you can say, all right, create a pull request from things. You can give it an issue. Copilot can also help you with next steps. It can actually suggest, it can summarize issues. By the way, if you're not using AI to summarize things, you're missing out on a big component of AI helping with you. If you're trying to keep up with AI, and aren't we all these days, you maybe have newsletters or articles or something you read. Just take the article link, if assuming it's available, or you can copy and paste it, put it into ChatGPT. Summarize this for me. Tell it to summarize it for you. Or tell it to give you top 10 bullet points from this. Or, my favorite, explain this to me like I'm 5, right? That kind of thing. So you can point it to an article, you can do that. You can also point these to pull requests. You can point them to GitHub or to GitHub issues, those kinds of things. And you can have it help give you an overview of that. Talking about reviewing your code. Did you know that AI can review your code? Do you want AI to review your code? Maybe that's another answer. Fun thing to do, have AI generate code and then have AI review its own code. Yeah, a lot of times it says, hey, it's great, things are good. Not all the time, but most of the time. But in things like GitHub Copilot, you can go and say, it's a menu click, go in and say, all right, here's my code, review and comment. And it can come back and it will give you the code suggestions for what it thinks should be done, tell you about the problem, and also then say, all right, you can go on to the next one if you want. So you can have AI review your code. It should not be, and I probably don't even have to say this, but I will, it should not be the only reviewer on your code, right? It absolutely should not. But it can give you that quick check, that other set of quote-unquote eyes on your code that you can actually then say, all right, we found some problems in that other reviewers don't have to look for. So using AI as a preliminary reviewer is a great way. Testing. We think about using AI to create things like generating unit tests, function tests, or integration tests in there, and that's all valid. But we can also ask it even things like, what is the process for testing and debugging the project's code? Now, if you're doing your own code, if you're the code you've written, you probably already know this. But if you have to take over a code base, if you have to start working with a third-party library, if you have to start working with an open source project, right? You can go in and ask it, what is the process for testing this code? Maybe you've got legacy code that doesn't have a lot of good tests on it. Things like testing from the start. It can help you set up a testing framework for your code. It can even suggest ones. In this case, it was saying, all right, I have Go code. Here's the ones most likely, testing framework, ENV, Ginkgo, so on. So you can ask it about testing frameworks. It can give you step-by-step instructions for setting things up. And you can even have custom generation instructions. Quick power tip here. GitHub Copilot now has the capability to have custom test instructions, custom review instructions, custom chat generation instructions. So you can tell it things like we use Bazel for our build system, or always make sure we have doc strings when reviewing code. You can have your own coding standards and stuff, and you can code these up as markdown files and have Copilot honor them. Testing beyond the basics. One of my favorite things to do when I'm working with Copilot doing tests, are there any other edge cases that should be tested? What else should I be thinking about? Things like, what do I test X? How do I test X for performance? How do I test Y for security? Test-driven development. You can have a whole test-driven development. One of the courses I do or classes I do, we actually do from the ground up. We create a POM file, have Copilot create the testing classes off of that. The test fail. Then we have it say referencing the POM file and the testing classes, create the implementation classes. So you can do test-driven development. You can have standardized prompts that you can use for unit test, integration test, fill in the blanks. All right, these are sample ones adapted from GitHub, but you can do integration testing. You can take these prompts and work with them and just start with them. Refactoring and updating. We'll get a couple minutes here. So I'll go through this real quick. You can ask Copilot to refactor code. For example, if you inherit code, the isPrime function to have more meaningful variable names and comments for better readability. Comes out, spits out new code, more comments, more readability in there. Refactor it for better testing. Maybe you have a combined function that would be better if it broke out. So actually it took the common function here, broke it out into different functions to make it easier to test. Refactoring update. Where do we use a certain API? What are the changes between APIs? If you ever have to port from one API version to another, then that's the case. You may want to go and ask it what to do with that. Augmenting it, adding logging. It can add the logging framework, do all those kinds of things. Changing implementation. All right, we're about 5 minutes out, so I'm going to go ahead real quickly cover these other ones. Documentation. This is one of my favorites, and I never would have thought that had it when I first started, because I thought, all right, just adding comments, no big deal. But a lot of times these systems will only put comments in the top level. You can then go and explain the logic. You can also have it, though, do things like say, verbosely comment this code so anyone can understand what each line is doing. Generating framework compatible documentation. You can have it generate documentation like for framework compatible, Swagger, those kinds of things, any kind of those things. You can have it generate documentation for APIs. You can have it generate functional documentation. You can have it generate summary documentation. You get the idea. Now here's the cool thing about this. How many of you love writing documentation? How many of you put it off till the last minute because you get the code right? I was that person, that developer. But think about this. I can ask the AI to give me the documentation for the code, and it can do it in just a matter of a few seconds. A little bit more, maybe than that, a minute or so. But you can do this at any point in the life cycle, right? You could do it when you're just starting out. You could do it when you're further along. So if you need to give your downstream consumers who are going to use your API documentation on your API, you can do that now when you're in the planning stages. You've got code stubbed out, or you can do it later on. If you need to give your product manager functional documentation so they can show what they're doing, hey, you can do that. If you need to give the higher-ups that, you can do it as well. All right, real quickly, maintenance, onboarding. You can ask Copilot to create onboarding documentation that will take people through setting things up and tell them how to get up and running with it. You can do things like explaining code. And one more quick tip, and this one I don't know if anybody's ever thought about. One of the things you can do if you're trying to get really good at a code base and you think you've got it down, ask the AI to quiz you. Ask the AI to develop a set of questions, multiple choice, true, false, whatever. Give it a set of questions. Say, give me 10 questions to test my understanding of this code base. And it will do that, and then it can give you the answers back. You can have it test yourself on it. All right, that's it. Sorry I went through that kind of fast, but I wanted to make sure we covered it. Questions? Thank you, everybody. I appreciate that. Lunch is coming up. Yes, I think we have one right there.
Thank you, great talk. I'm a adjunct community college instructor. Locally.
Great, thank you.
Teach web
Yeah.
development. What's your recommendation for students, folks learning web development? How much AI, and I struggle, I'm trying to figure that out now. How much AI do I teach them? Is it better to stick with the fundamentals and then let them figure that out later on? But just what are your thoughts?
Personal opinion, you always think everybody needs to have an understanding of the fundamentals, because you want to have an understanding of what the AI is doing. You want to be able to make an intelligent decision about whether the AI is telling you the right thing or whether it's off base. So I'm a big proponent in believing the fundamentals first. After that, I think AI is great for bootstrapping ideas, for saying, all right, now you know the fundamentals, let's see, let's take your code, let's let AI review it, for example. Or let's say, ask AI, what else could we be doing here? That kind of thing. So I tend to look at it again almost as teaching folks AI, again, as an intern, as someone who is a competent programmer and stuff, but you are still responsible for it. And so now you have your automated intern, and you can say, please review the code, or please give me suggestions for that. And then you come back and you can critique that. Or you can ask AI questions about, have it develop a quiz about the code as well too. So I'm a proponent of saying teach the fundamentals, help them make sure they know what they're doing, but then start to use AI as an accelerator, as another sort of reviewer of your code. Code reviews, sometimes we usually hand off to everybody else, but they can get practice with doing that by learning by doing code reviews. Onboarding to a new framework. Once they know that, you can have, all right, go and use the AI and help it get you onboarded to that. But always, always, always coming back to reviewing what the AI says and making sure it's good. Again, using it kind of that intern that's capable, but doesn't necessarily know all the details.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Yeah.
I was wondering if you have any strategies or tool advice for working on like very large code bases, because some of the examples you're asking like very generic questions, and I've had like context window problems of, like how you get around the context window token limits.
So you're talking about how analyzing issues from very large code bases and such?
Yeah, some of the questions, like some of the examples you're asking is like, if you're asking a generic question on a very large code base, how do you get around the context window size on some of those? And is there tools or strategies that are maybe better now?
Right, so basically, if you're using RAG, you can have all of your data in a local vector database. I know there's a talk coming up this afternoon about vector databases and such, but you can take all your data and you can transform it into numeric form that can then be searched. So if you are looking for a particular item, you can say, where do we do authentication in our huge code base? And what that will do, the RAG query, it will take your query and find the most semantically, numerically similar results, and then get the results back, and then you can go from there. Other things you can do, talking about large code bases, may not be quite what you were asking. Think about having AI analyzing logs, right? You have logs, you have things that are happening, you have a problem that occurs. Ask the AI, where can I, in the log, what does correlate like with the usage log with the errors that we're seeing? What are the correlations there? Those kinds of things. What other kinds of things should I investigate? We can ask the AI, what other kinds of things should I investigate across this? But the first step, I think, is producing that sort of RAG data store, because that way you're only finding the most relevant hits from your local things based on what you're querying. Then you're taking that and adding it on to your query that you can send on to the LLM. So you don't have to send your entire code base across. You find the most relevant related information to your query, add that on, and that goes across. That gives the LLM more localized context to work with and answer the question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're going to do another question here since we started a little bit late.
So I noticed that a lot of examples that you presented revolved around GitHub Copilot.
Yeah.
But to be honest, my usage of GitHub Copilot, even AI-powered coding tools like Cursor, Windsurf have fallen off a cliff in light of Claude Code. So do you think they provide any value now that Claude Code is out?
I tend to think that all AI tools provide some value, whether it's your best, one or not. And I've heard fantastic things about Claude Code. Full disclaimer, I haven't used Claude Code. There were a couple of quick examples of Tab 9 and stuff in there as well. I'd say whatever tool makes you feel comfortable for you, is probably the right one to use. But the concepts, hopefully the concepts carry forward. The idea of asking it questions out of the box. How else could I think about performance or security or those kinds of things in there? Those are the kinds of things I'm trying to carry across here. It's not necessarily about the tooling you use. You can use whatever tool works best for you in there. Copilot is great at some things and terrible at some things. I saw a recent article where the developer said that, or there was somebody saying the new pastime for GitHub developers was just, kind of wringing their hands and being sad about the pull requests that GitHub itself, that Copilot itself was generating in there. So you take it with a grain of salt, but use whatever AI tool you want. But the idea is when you can ask it the kinds of things out of the box, like what else should I be looking at? Where do we do this? That kind of thing. So I think whatever tool is a good fit for you and is comfortable for you to do that. The one thing I'll say is kind of get in the idea of thinking about this mindset. Don't tie yourself to a particular tool, right? Because these tools come and go. We all saw the thing probably about Cursor, where the pricing model just blew people out of the water on the quotas and such as that. So now we can think about learning about how to interact with AI. Keep track of what prompts work for you. Keep track of what prompts work for your team. Maybe you keep a prompt collection, for example, or what things worked. I wouldn't get tied to an AI, but use whatever AI works best for you.
All right, thank you. A round of applause for Brent.
Thanks.
All right.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks, everybody.
All right. How y'all feeling? Yeah, good. Ready for lunch? Okay.